this graphic novel that we're talking about today, Batman Year One, is also a precursor to the Batman. And not only is it the blueprint, it inspires the interpretation of these characters in the world. It could exist in canon right before it. Like this would be right to the left of it on the bookshelf.
This would be like almost exactly. It would work perfectly.
Yeah, because there's a line that I didn't really. I guess I didn't finish digesting in my brain, but there's a line in the Batman where Bruce says he's been doing the Batman thing for like 2 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And everything about Batman Year One that we're going to talk about today could exist in that canon. We just didn't see it on screen.
Yeah. Because
the arc of this story is introducing Catwoman, but not really developing a relationship, just introducing her. And the real flow of the plot here is Batman and Gordon becoming friends. And when we meet them in the Robert Pattinson movie, they already have a relationship. Yeah. I don't think there's anything in here that contradicts the movie.
Yeah, no, not really.
It flows really organically.
It does. Yeah, no, it totally does. You definitely see the influence for sure. I mean, even in the Batman, you have a lot of like voiceover of Bruce, and there's lots of voiceover in this comic sequence as well.
Yeah, so this is Batman Year One, a 4-issue miniseries, standard 22-page issues, written by Frank Miller, who also did Dark Knight Strikes, or the Dark Knight Returns, Dark Knight Strikes Again, and then a third one and a bunch of other ones. He did a Daredevil run, but this is the definitive Batman origin story.
Cam, you were like sitting on 2% of the couch.
I do this every time.
You want to scoot back?
And when I don't do it, my brain shuts down.
Maybe that's why our couch is so ruined. Because you're sitting on the 2% edge. Okay, sorry.
Written by Frank Miller, drawn by David Mazzucchelli, and the colorist is Richmond Lewis, who traditionally is a painter. And she only did a few comics, and she happened to do one of the most important comics of all time.
A woman named Richmond?
Yeah, I don't know the full story.
Good for her. That's awesome. Should we I'm just going to do a quick recap of this story in case you haven't read it.
If you loved the movie and you're here because of our movie episode, go read this, and then you'll enjoy this discussion. We will spoil the whole thing, but it's perfect. Totally. It's quick. It's punchy.
It's only 4 issues, so it doesn't take that long to read.
You'll adore it. And it's on sale everywhere right now.
But in the event that you just don't want to read it, or you read it a while ago, you don't remember what happens, here's a quick recap of what happens in this story. This will not be as in-depth as like our chapter recaps for our Lord of the Rings and Witcher discussions. Just a little overview.
An overview.
Yeah. So Lieutenant James Gordon moves to Gotham City with his wife Barbara after apparently messing things up at his last job. She has a baby on the way. Gordon is plunged into a dark world of dirty police corruption, which he wants no part of. Meanwhile, 25-year-old Bruce Wayne is returning home to Gotham after being away for 12 years. He's trying to figure out how to fight crime and fix Gotham and like avenge his parents' death, basically. Or deaths, plural, because there were, in fact, 2 parents. Okay, we see him develop his Batman persona along with the suit, the gadgets, and how he'll go about doing things without causing unnecessary harm. Meanwhile, Gordon is, with difficulty, rising in the police force. He's, like, not taking shit from any of them. He becomes popular in the press and so sort of develops power.
The problem is he's not taking shit from anyone or bribes.
Yes, right. And like everyone's like, he's not fitting in with our style. And it's really funny. And so Batman is also going higher and higher up on the criminal chain and is basically trying to take down all the dirty cops and political figures in Gotham. Gordon is crumbling under the pressure to catch Batman and deal with all the dirty cops, and he ends up cheating on his wife with a female sergeant. Selina, meanwhile, aka Catwoman. What's Selina's last name?
Kyle.
Oh, that's easy. Why did I know that? Okay. Selina Kyle is also trying to take down the dirty cops, but Batman keeps getting in the way because Selina is going about it in a more like vengeful and fatal way. Kim, you worded it nicely earlier. You said she's not fighting crime. She's basically punishing people instead. Gordon figures out that Batman is Bruce Wayne, and he decides that he wants him on his side. The corrupt cops try to control Gordon by blackmailing him about the cheating because they found out. Gordon ends up having to tell his wife about that, and then the dirty cops are trying to assassinate Gordon's wife and child, but Batman ends up helping saving them. Gordon and Batman eventually team up, and then we get a tease for the Joker at the end. That's a very abbreviated version of what happens. But that's basically
it sort of settles into this new partnership, and we kind of glance at the horizon, and we see the typical villains of the Batman lore beginning to
Yeah.
It really smoothly blends back into continuity.
Yeah.
Because this wasn't published as a standalone miniseries. It was just published as a series of 4 comics in the mainline Batman title.
Yeah. Right.
So I like that it dovetails right back into continuity. It's very clean.
Yeah, no, it is good. And I will say, if you didn't listen to sorry, that's the chair. If you didn't listen to the Batman movie episode, or you haven't been here or whatever, I don't like superheroes. I think it's really important to clarify that. And even still, I really enjoyed this comic series. Again, I think Batman is the only superhero who matters because he doesn't have magic superpowers. He's just a guy who's trying to do the right thing and has all this access to cool stuff, and he's really like physically fit and powerful in that way, but he's not, he can't fly.
He also, by a country mile, has the best villains.
Yeah, exactly. The villains are really good in this as well. And so, yeah, I did enjoy reading this. It wasn't like my favorite comic experience ever. There's things I've enjoyed more. And honestly, I'm just not, I like comics, but I'm not nearly as into them as you are.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just not good at following what is happening in a comic. I get real confused sometimes.
Well, I mean, that might not be a you problem depending on the comic.
I don't know, because like I got confused a bit at the end of this one. I got a little lost in what was going on. There was a lot of jumping around, and I was like, what's going on?
We'll talk
also,
about
there are a lot of names of people that I didn't.
I mean, I'm going to talk about maybe 4 names.
Yeah, anyway, my point is I really enjoyed this. It wasn't the greatest thing I've ever read, but I really enjoyed it, especially after having seen the Batman. I appreciate it a lot more. So yeah, it was a fun little journey to go on. I liked the dual perspective of Gordon and Bruce. They're immediately like, I mean, the first perspective you get is Gordon. And so he's like the main character as much as Bruce is, and I think that's really fun.
If you've heard our episodes about Lord of the Rings or The Witcher, I mean, really anything we've ever talked about, there's a lot of structural analysis. We talk about echoes and callbacks, things developing in parallel and kind of talking to each other, harmonizing. There's so much of that here with Gordon and Batman, where there's not, I mean, one is not really a bigger character than the other. If anything, we see Gordon way more than we see Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's the story is really more about him and his struggle, and Batman is just sort of in the background. I mean, he's still really he's important, and you care about him, but Gordon is the main character of this, which is fun.
I think this is masterfully told. I think the art is absolute top tier.
The art is really good. I really liked this because you tried to get me to read, what was the other Batman one?
Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns. I couldn't stand the art in that. I don't know.
And Frank Miller wrote and did the art for that one.
Yeah, I tried. I just couldn't get into it. But this one, I really enjoy the art style. The art style is really important to me in comics. If I'm not vibing with it, then I just can't read it because I just don't want to. But so this one was good.
This one opens with a crime blotter. It opens with a bit of prose.
That's right.
It's not jumping right into comic pages. And it's a fascinating way to introduce the tone of this story. The page is yellowed. It's slightly off center. I mean, it looks like they made, a prop document for a movie or something. And it's heavily editorialized. Someone the writer commenting on crimes and things happening around Gotham. And the tone shifts. The attitude towards the police shifts through the piece in a way that I think shows you the breadth of opinions in Gotham City and then the overall attitude we're going to have here towards authority.
Yeah.
It starts feeling very pro-cop, being kind of sarcastic about the dumb criminals.
Yeah.
And then it feels very anti-cop
when
it tells the story about the guy who robbed the donut shop when all the cops were in there and didn't notice at all. They didn't even recognize that something was happening, that a crime was taking place.
Or they did recognize it, didn't do anything about it.
Right, yes. And that's the final twist. It goes to police corruption.
Yes.
And you understand that sardonic tone that the person was reporting the crimes and the police's response with was almost a disdainful distance from the whole thing because there's no faith in the police stopping crime.
Yeah.
And there's no faith in the people to not commit more crimes. It's this general hopeless cynicism.
Yeah, it's a great way to like establish what Gotham is like at this time in this plotline and this interpretation, and it feels so like brutal and bitter and hopeless. It's a great way to do that without just like having panning shots over the city and someone in voiceover saying "there's crime everywhere."
It feels
like this was a much more effective way to do that.
It's like the representations of New York before Times Square was a Disney store.
Mm-hmm.
The 80s, or Taxi Driver, that kind of mentality towards cities, which COVID really dragged us back to. But there's a dark, messy, suspicious tone.
Mm-hmm.
The city's dangerous, and the people in it can't really be trusted.
Yeah.
That's in one page, how he's introducing this story. There's something, I counted the pages just to make sure. Going with just 22-page issues, coloring completely within the lines, in only 4 issues, when most series like this are 6 issues.
Yeah.
Doing it in 4, in that standard format, makes this all the more impressive. In the same way, like, there were some Game of Thrones episodes that were an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And some of them that were like 48 minutes and 60. But every single Breaking Bad episode was like 44 minutes and 32 seconds.
Yeah, because they had commercial breaks and stuff, because it's on network TV.
And I think there is a certain flex when you can exceed the standards so far while working within all the set parameters.
Yeah.
And I am kind of more impressed by the way this story performs within that restriction.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the first issue. We begin...
You're so excited. I love it.
I'm very excited.
I wrote 5 bullet points here because I knew you had a ton of notes and I was preparing to let you take the lead, but you just seem so excited.
I did the day I wrote these notes, I had done a solo episode, which you guys will hear later in the month, and it just didn't feel good. I fixed it later and added in some stuff, but I just
I'll
wasn't
be the
feeling...
judge, Cam. Let the people
will.
decide. What if it actually sucks?
But then I was trying to catch up on this later that day, and I read the rest of year 1 at night, and I started writing these notes, and I was just on. It felt like where I wanted to be earlier in the day. So, yes, I'm happy with my notes, maybe. So we begin issue 1 with this contrast between Gordon and Bruce Wayne, where we see their attitudes towards civilization and the people of Gotham. And they're kind of both afraid. Gordon is afraid for his wife.
Yeah.
And a society kind of in decay.
Yeah.
And raising a kid in a hopeless, cynical world.
Yeah.
And Bruce is coming at it from a private plane. We see Gordon in like a stacked shitty bus.
Yeah.
And then we see Bruce through like the window of his plane. It's gorgeous framing.
The contrast is so good.
And Bruce is the one referring to the people as the enemy.
Yeah.
Which makes, it engages that initial suspicion of this guy as an out-of-touch, condescending billionaire. And, you kind of counter that later with, well, no, he has a reason to be kind of triggered by crime.
Oh, yeah, right.
But it engages both sides of that argument.
Yeah. Well, actually, you see the flashback of Bruce and his parents before you see any of this. Like, you get the editorials like you talked about, and then you just see one panel of, like, Bruce and his parents after they were shot. So you immediately know what he's working with.
Right.
So it helps counter that negative image you might have of him otherwise.
And again, the efficiency of this story. I was trying to write down all the things that I liked about it, just from a technical level as a comic. I consider this story a miracle of form. The way the dates are typed. And you notice that they're typed. Because almost all of the rest of what's happening, there's so much of the characterization is done through internal monologue. And it's Gordon and Bruce. That's always what we're contrasting.
Yeah.
But their monologues are written in different styles.
Yeah, like Bruce's is in this like curly cursive, basically. And then Gordon's is like just this all caps type.
So both handwritten. So the letter is doing a lot of work here.
Yeah.
And I talked about the colorist, Richmond Lewis. Coming at it from a painter's perspective, I noticed how washed out the colors are here, where it almost looked like kind of a retro watercolor thing.
Yeah.
And apparently when it was initially published, it was on newsprint. And the technology at the time, it was limited to like 60 colors you kind of had access to. And then she recolored it later for this trade paperback, which was printed more normally now on better paper.
Yeah.
But the washed out colors, nothing being flat. Like, if you go back to the 60s, I've read some of the original Spider-Man comics with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and they're working from, like, one shade of blue, one shade of yellow, one shade of red.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly charming as well.
Yeah.
But here you can see maybe a whole panel will be shades of green. Or, Gordon goes through an underpass. The colors change. But it's never perfect. It's always slightly stylized.
Yeah.
Romantic, but not in a beautiful sense.
Sure, yeah.
There's something just so luxurious in the color work here. It's not just the bland, ugly airbrushing that modern coloring is in a lot of comics.
Yeah, but it's also using color, because they could have just made Gotham all shades of gray.
Yes.
Because it's grimy and dirty and sad. But there's a lot of purple and blue and reds and pinks, and it's very stylized. You're right, but
there's a texture to it.
But it's done in a way that doesn't make the city look more beautiful than it is. It just romanticizes it, but in a sad way, if that makes sense.
And because everything is done so quickly, you notice it. You notice the contrast between the inner monologue typefaces because we're jumping back and forth between these characters so much. And you notice the typeface of the days and the dates that are plastered all over the page because we're moving through 3 or 4 days in a single page sometimes.
Yeah, right. It goes through several months in the whole storyline.
There are days that only last 2 panels in this story. You see time passing in a way that I don't think you really see in any other medium. You can have a sped up sort of montage in a movie.
Yeah.
But in no single frame of that are you seeing time passing.
Yeah, and it's hard to do the same thing in just a regular book as well, just
because you
words.
Just see a block of words.
Yeah, I mean, you could have different dates and just but then you have to write out what happens, and that takes time and space on the page. This is just very quickly, boom, boom, boom.
The story, I mean, and I think this is a testament to Miller and Mazzucchelli. They know the advantages of the comic book format. Yeah. And they are playing on that in such a smart way. They're exploiting those advantages to make this a story that would make a great movie. But I think it makes a pretty perfect comic book.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
So we see time passing, we see days on a page. There is a ruthless, tight story being told here. We tear through a plot. I mean, this in the same way you go through a season's worth of plot in The Batman, where it's a 3-hour movie, but it could feel like a whole season of television.
Yeah.
Here, it's incredible that it's 4 issues because it could be 12.
it felt like at least 6, if not closer to 10 or 12 issues. It was a very dense, and even though you're right, it followed the 22-page structure for each issue, but they were dense pages. A lot happened on each page.
So you're tearing through a plot, but the thing that accents all of that plot, all of the movement of characters, the schemes, the agendas, the crimes, are these little sly character beats. And I was trying to find a way to express that balancing in this storytelling, and then Frank Miller did it for me. He's describing Bruce Wayne's disguise when he's going to walk through Gotham. He's dressed in plain clothes, and he puts this fake scar on his face. Yeah. And he calls that, in this narrative overview, he calls it a single, memorable, distracting detail. And he says if he has the scar, no one will ever identify him as Bruce Wayne. Doesn't matter how often he's on TV.
Yeah.
If there's a single, memorable, distracting detail.
Yeah.
And as I'm looking at all of these days of Gordon's life move so quickly, we learn about the corruption, the expectation, the moment he lands in Gotham, that he is going to bend to this will and be part of this corrupt regime. There are details. The way Flass, who's sort of the corrupt cop in this story, who becomes Gordon's partner, the way he's taller than Gordon, the way he looks down on him, leans on him. There are those pinprick details throughout this story that gives life and flavor to all the plot we're racing through. It's gorgeously done. It's so, I've read this 3 times now, and it's just so much fun. So, back to that inner monologue for a second. Bruce's, I was trying to characterize the difference in these guys, because I think they become sort of one voice at the end of the story.
They do.
They are hopeful, world-weary crime fighters.
And trying to fix things, even if they feel kind of hopeless while doing it.
But in this first issue, Bruce is stiff. He's hopeful, but wounded. Like you said, he's been gone for 12 years. He's coming back from this weird kind of privileged sabbatical into this hellhole that he's afraid of.
Yeah.
And he doesn't speak in these long, Ivy educate, long winding sentences that you would expect from someone who's kind of eulogizing and narrating their difficult journey through life and this private plane. Bruce's inner monologue is clipped. Most of his thoughts are interrupted with ellipses. We get sentence fragments more than we get really ever a complete thought from him. Gordon's the one that we get complete thoughts from.
Yeah. Which is, again, why he feels like more of the main character. He's giving us much more of a narrative, whereas we're just kind of getting brief little vignettes and glimpses of how Bruce is feeling and thinking.
Gordon's the one really in the thick of it.
Yeah,
he's the one expressing this desperate humanity when he's shoulder to shoulder with all the cynical, miserable people of Gotham.
Whereas Bruce is just sort of on the outside trying to come at it from that perspective.
And as we see them both engaged and dragged into the drama of this story, Gordon rises to violence for the first time when he beats the shit out of Flass.
Yes, after Flass and all the guys beat him up.
They jump him, basically, to intimidate him into doing what he's told. So
and then
Gordon,
he fucks with Flass to be like, no, you don't get to do that to me.
So Gordon follows these guys to their little poker night after they all beat him up together. He watches them all leave.
Yep.
Then he follows Flass home, runs him off the road, takes his gun, takes all of his clothes off. He ties him up and leaves him there.
Yeah, he handcuffs him with his own handcuffs and leaves him out in the cold.
Knowing that he'll never tell anyone what happened.
Exactly.
So he's rising to this ugliness. The thing that these guys have both condemned and expressed fear about in Gotham. He engages in that. He gets down in the dirt expressly to protect his family.
Yes.
And there's a payoff or sort of an echo across storylines back to Bruce Wayne. He becomes Batman, a character whose whole business is brutality and violence because of the violence done to his family.
Yeah.
So there are echoes in the development of these characters so long before they meet.
Right.
And it kind of plays with our sympathies because we start on Team Gordon. And then as we learn more about Bruce's backstory, we go a little more Team Batman. And he plays with that balancing kind of throughout.
Yeah.
So that by the time they're finally on the same page at the end of issue 4, we feel like it's a smart, invested decision, right?
Yeah.
We've played both sides of it, and we're totally on board.
Yeah, I also like that we're playing with the idea about fatherhood and being a child as well. Like you see Gordon struggling with the concept of eventually becoming a father, because right at the beginning he says that he's selfishly worried, hoping that his wife is not pregnant because he doesn't want to raise a kid and all this.
He's waiting on the pregnancy tests.
Yes. And then when it turns out she is pregnant, he's really afraid of what that's going to mean and what it's going to be like to be a father and how he's going to deal with that. And then that's countered by, or at least just presented alongside, Bruce reflecting on his childhood and him being a child in this horrible world and his parents dying because of how horrible the world is and him having to deal with that. So Bruce is almost like what Gordon fears his child will become. And so you see them both sort of struggling with that. And then them coming together seems to make a lot of sense, especially because Bruce is the one who, as Batman, ends up saving Gordon's family from being destroyed the way that his was.
This is the mark of a great writer for me, when you can guide the audience's subconscious and still surprise and engage them.
Yeah.
To lead them to something and then pivot right at the last moment. So as all of these comparisons about family and violence, values, and the things you'll do to protect people, as that is in our brains, issue 1 ends and issue 2 begins with an instant contrast between these characters that almost works as a thought experiment about these ideas, where Gordon responds to an armed man who's holding his kids hostage.
Yeah.
Which engages his concerns about fatherhood as much as it does Bruce's origin story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Bruce isn't even there for this. This is just a Gordon thing. And it's a way to... the initial danger as we approach the scene is the crazy guy. I mean, he's talking in this gobbledygook gibberish.
Yeah.
It's him hurting the kids. We think that's the danger.
Yeah.
And we think that's what Gordon's worried about. We're projecting our thoughts about him and fatherhood onto him in this moment. And then we learn that that's not even what he's worried about. He's worried about the other cops there who are going to escalate the situation.
Yes.
So he's the one who puts the gun down. He's the one who tries to engage the guy and solve this problem, instead of the million other cops there with the rifles leveled at him, up in the window. Gandalf.
Cool.
Here's the problem with this podcast. I use shorthand for characters. I use the first letter of their name. G is now Gandalf, Gollum, Geralt, and Gordon. So sometimes I slip.
Gandalf just pops out, saves the day. That's so funny. Okay.
So we get to see Gordon being a cop. We get to learn about him in action.
Yeah.
He refers to his gun as an ugly weight on his hip, which I thought was just, oh, I've got the Frank Miller gets me so excited,
Well,
just the way he writes about things.
I mean, the scene, I forget which issue it is. I think it's issue 2. He's in the shooting range and he's like practicing.
To get to that.
Oh, yep. I'm sorry. Do you want me to wait?
No, you can.
He says like he's like practicing shooting. He's really good at it. And you just hear him say, or you see him say, I hate the gun. I hate my job.
Yes.
And then what does he say after that? I don't know, something else inspiring, but it's really good.
Absolutely. So he's referring, we think he's this proud cop. Throughout this story, as we chart the course of the plot with these interstitials of TV news reporters. And Gordon has this reputation after he solves this incident as being a hero cop, saving kids' lives. You know, it's the most above the fold front page heroic thing you can do as a cop.
Yeah.
And contrast that with him hating the gun.
Yeah.
Calling it an ugly weight on his hip.
Yeah.
When he holds it up to show the guy that he's disarming himself and he's going to come in and try to negotiate.
Yeah.
He says he holds up the gun like a dead rat. And we see this kind of fuming under the surface. This rage at the system and what he has to do to survive in this world.
Yeah.
So then, like you said, we cut to him saying he hates the gun, but he trains all the time. He's motivated by violence as a deterrent.
Yeah.
He's narrating as he's at the shooting range. He's talking about the kick of the gun, the burn of the gunpowder as it kind of shoots back up into his face. He keeps talking about the bullet as a wad of lead. And it's so gross the way he talks about the gun. In the same way the violence is gross. We've talked about in the last couple of weeks when we've talked about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. We talked about the violence being crunchy. There's something gory and gross and schlocky and fun to that. If you take all those sound effects and remove the tone, it's the disgusting, awful, permanent violence of this world in this story. But that's all developed in just these little hints.
Yeah. And you see like both Batman and Gordon really hating that violence, and they're still combating it with violence in a way, obviously, but they hate that that's the way it is. And they both they both hate guns. You know, Batman famously doesn't use guns. We talked about that in our movie episode. So it's cool that they both kind of have that hatred of how gross the violence is.
Yeah, so you see a cop who doesn't want to use a gun, and then you cut back to Batman in the full costume, and he's not doing this cool, clean, choreographed, beautiful violence of the movies. Most movies where he's just a really efficient melee fighter. Here, this early Batman, this is a fun kind of wrinkle on the mythos, he's bellowing at criminals as he charges at them.
Yeah.
Which is as much to confuse and alarm them and maybe disarm them as it is to like scare them.
Yeah.
Like he's trying to de-escalate immediately. I just thought that was in the same way you can show him failing in combat. Or there was a moment in the movie, The Batman, where he tries to use that, the thing on his back when he's flying off the building.
Oh, yeah.
And then the balloon shoots up, but it catches on the bridge.
Yeah, and he kind of messes up the landing.
And he totally screws up and wipes out. And that shows you like, oh, he's new at this.
Yeah.
Him bellowing at criminals makes him look afraid. Where he's trying to intimidate them like an animal. Like when a bear breaks into a house.
Because he doesn't know what else to do, yeah. Well, and you see him completely botch, like his first confrontation with like a group of 3 kids, like they're in high school. They're like stealing a TV or something. So like that's like his first run is trying to get these kids, but he completely messes it up because they do what he doesn't expect, and he doesn't want to kill them because they're just kids. And so he was like trying to fight them off and stop them, but not end up killing them in the process. And he nearly like ends up killing a kid because he like falls off a balcony, and it's a complete like disaster. And it's not what you expect from Batman, who can easily wipe out a whole mob of guys.
Right. And I think there's an allusion to that at the beginning of The Batman, when he's defending the guy on the subway. And we see all these little vignettes of people holding up convenience stores. And he's talking about basically choosing his battles.
Yeah.
And when he can intervene.
Yeah.
And that feels like a thought that is born of situations like this where he completely screws it up.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And he has to make sure that he's never where someone predicts that he's going to be. So he has to like kind of randomly go around the city and pick a different spot every time. So it's like he's learned from his past mistakes, like the mistakes that he's making here.
And we can see the wisdom of Batman and Gordon in that they're very different insights. These are very compatible tools, but they're not working together. And we see them observing each other's actions. They're intersecting their storylines without the characters actually interacting.
Yeah, right.
Gordon has all these traps to get criminals, and he's got cops dressed up as bums. And you see Batman kind of like wrinkle his nose. He's like, he's wasting so much time and money with this.
Yeah.
So he just hogties one of them and delivers him to the cops.
Yep.
So you see them kind of correcting each other's moves. And we're like already in the second issue just begging for them to work together. And then you get the wrinkle that I know you didn't mention in the recap of Harvey Dent.
Oh yeah, I just left him out. But
which makes sense. And you see that Batman is working with Harvey Dent.
Yeah, who at this point is assistant district attorney. He's not full DA yet.
And as you know, the character's always developed, he is a good guy. He's a good guy right up until he turns into Two-Face.
Yeah.
But he's trustworthy here. And you see Gordon sort of approach him, but he's not totally sure. I mean, for a while, Gordon thinks he's Batman.
Yeah. Here's a thought I just had. In the Batman, the movie that just came out, why isn't Harvey Dent the DA? It's some other guy. Where's Harvey Dent?
Because it's been done recently in the Christopher Nolan thing.
I don't know
Or
how...
maybe he's the next DA.
Okay, I don't know how... my Batman lore obviously is not good. So have there been other, like did they make up that character? I don't even know what his name is in the movie. Or is that like a comic character?
He wasn't one I recognized.
Okay. Just a thought I had. I guess, they didn't want to be too similar.
I think it was just to swerve and do
what
something
if we also
original.
have a brunette named Rachel?
Exactly.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So then we end issue 2 with a truck, a police shooting, and Batman looking like he's screwed, hidden inside a building. So, cutting into issue 3, we get a tease between Selina and Batman with the Siamese cat.
Yes.
Because we know she has a bunch of cats. She talks about Siamese cats. And then he's in this building and there's another one.
Yeah.
And we know that they like travel in pairs. So Batman here, it's the first time we see him totally outgunned. In the same way we saw Gordon being a cop, and that's how we learned about his character. Now we need to see Batman against a SWAT team. So we're testing him without all of the gadgets. He doesn't have Alfred in the Batcave. Basically, we're seeing Batman without the Bruce Wayne advantages. No tools, no money to help him out of the situation.
Nope.
He's got the dumb costume, and I mean, a couple panels into issue 3, he's got 2 bullet wounds.
Yeah, right. Well, because he has to like ditch his belt at one point because it catches on fire or something. I forget. So he loses a bunch of the tools that are on his belt, literally.
Yeah.
So that's funny.
And this is not... I noticed in the Batman how many times Robert Pattinson's Batman was shot.
Yeah.
And his whole armor was bulletproof.
Yeah.
I mean, when he got a shotgun blast at close range,
that
knocked the wind out of it knocked the wind out of him, and then kind of he just passed out. But there was no damage from that.
No, he didn't like actually take a bullet.
The blast wounded him. But I mean, the scene where he takes out all the guys with the machine guns, they shoot him in the chest probably 30 times.
Yeah.
But he's fine.
Yeah.
This is not that Batman.
No, he gets shot in the leg immediately.
I mean, he's wearing the gray and black outfit.
Yeah.
The very, very old school Batman kind of uniform.
With the black undies over top the tights.
Exactly. He's wearing tights. So we see the entry and exit wounds of these bullets. Yeah. And we see him like running funny, trying to keep up with that. I love how fallible this Batman is.
Yeah.
And it's a prophecy of later when we get to see how fallible Gordon is, when at least in his marriage. The villain of this story. This is sort of a question I have for you.
Yeah.
Because most Batman stories are defined by the villain.
Well, right. That's something I noticed really intensely here. Like there really aren't any Batman villains, quote unquote. I mean, there's a brief mention of Falcone, who I only know from the movie last night. But
he was in the Christopher Nolan ones too.
You think I'm gonna remember that?
I'm just telling you.
I'm telling you.
I'm just saying you've seen it before.
My Batman lore is, but like there was no Penguin, there was no Riddler, there was no. And like Catwoman wasn't really a villain here, so she's not the villain. So like the villain is it's just the police force. It's the completely corrupt system. Like that's what it is.
Or, since this story is told from two perspectives, the villain is Batman.
I suppose. Not really though, because he ends up teaming up with Gordon. Like, so the villain to who though?
But if there's such a moral gray area consuming every character in this story, the villain is either political corruption and the corruption within the police.
Yeah.
Or from a different perspective, it's criminals and vigilantes. And
okay, well, if that's the case,
people.
Sure, but then who's the hero? If you have a villain, you have a hero. So who's the hero in that outlook?
And I think this becomes the lesson of this story. Because as the thing in the building kind of washes out, Batman uses the bats who come and save the day. It's very cool. And it's a lot like how we see the bats just flying around in the Batcave in the Batman.
Yeah.
I can't believe how many times I just said the word the. After that, Batman and Gordon sort of recede to their corners, like boxers in between rounds. It has that sort of feeling like we're going to all catch our breath now. And we hear this lie that Bruce Wayne is off skiing. We know that he's recovering from all those bullet wounds. And then we cut panels and we realize, oh shit, no, he's actually skiing. Like that part was true.
Yeah.
And then we get Gordon cheating.
Yeah.
He kisses Sarah. The corruption and temptation in Gotham is not unique to the police force.
Yeah.
That has now infiltrated even Gordon. The guy who we see every time we cut to the news anchors, he's called a hero cop.
Yeah.
I think the lesson of this story is that there are no heroes.
Sure. Yeah.
Gordon's the most morally pure character in this story.
Yes.
Until he screws up really bad.
Yeah. And he like even says like, I know that this is bad. I should be like apologizing profusely. I'm completely messing this up. I'm not spending enough time at home. I'm cheating on my pregnant wife, but but he like won't do anything about it.
Right.
Yeah.
There's the same humanity that made him so relatable and compassionate is now that inexplicable tragedy that's consuming his character.
Yeah.
Moving into issue 4, which is I think my favorite one.
Yeah.
We get this really terse plot development of Sarah leaving Gotham.
Yeah.
And that almost off panel, almost like the character we're following so closely was ashamed of it. So he did it really quickly while we weren't looking.
Yeah.
There is that suggestion that like a bit of a fourth wall thing where we come in after he's taken this like quick tragic action. And this is my favorite Frank Miller bit because the description of Sarah leaving Gotham is so tragic and gifted. And it borrows from that clipped inner monologue style I talked about with Bruce at the beginning here to almost read like verse. So I wrote it down and I'll indicate the line breaks because this is different fragments of inner monologue that are handwritten on these kind of fake pieces of paper. That's how it's stylized on the page.
Okay.
So he says, her arms are strong, her whole body's strong. Line break. It's late. We've both worked late again. Line break. I never get tired around her. Line break. She's requested a transfer. She's leaving Gotham. Line break. I'm in love with her. Line break. It's the only thing to do. Like it's so sad. And you absolutely think he's in the wrong.
Yeah.
At this point, we're totally siding with the wife, even though we don't see much of her.
Yeah.
But we're totally siding against him.
Yeah.
And he's not pitying himself.
No, not quite.
But there's such a tragedy and beauty to what he's saying.
It's just very human. It's a really human moment.
It's utterly human. And you cut that with a very similar writing style. Maybe one of the moments where these characters start to converge and speak with one voice. You cut to Batman fighting a criminal. And he says, "You can never escape me." Line break. "Bullets don't harm me. Nothing harms me. But I know pain. I know pain. Sometimes I share it with someone like you." And it's that same humanity, but he's justified, right? He has that like moral confidence where Gordon has lost it.
Right.
And now Gordon is in that wasteland of fear that Bruce had when he came back to Gotham. And Batman has now found purpose.
Yeah.
They've kind of switched places here.
Yeah.
But both of those little speeches, and why I read them in full, is because I think they capture the same humanity that I love in Shakespeare. The same thing that can survive 400 years and speak to people immediately and completely. The qualities that those little speeches have, they're universal, they're eternal, they're basically written in Cat in the Hat language. They're simple and bold.
Yeah.
So you absolutely know what's happening. There's an absolute clarity there, and they feel definitive. They're the thesis statements for those characters, and you can deduce everything about their situation and who they are as human beings from like 2 panels of them talking.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's the most efficient comic I've ever read.
Yeah, no, I did. I really enjoyed that sequence. I thought that was really impressive and sad.
And again, it's them working in concert with each other. It's that he's reaching these character crescendos in such different situations at the same time. There's such a musical flow to this work.
Well, right, and it just like the more that the plot goes on and the more happens to them, the more you realize like how much Gordon and Bruce both need each other and would work so well together, and how they balance each other out. Even though, like you said, they've sort of switched places, it's like they both need each other, and that just becomes more and more clear as this goes on.
So Gordon is then kind of blackmailed about the affair, and we see Batman leaning on that criminal Skeever.
Yes.
And Gordon it's flirting with Gordon becoming a criminal, right? Is he going to follow what these guys say now so they don't blow up his marriage?
Yeah,
It's the most uncertain moment we have for Gordon.
Right.
And it's heightened as Gordon and Batman kind of cross paths again. And Bruce Wayne is manipulating him. He's sort of outfoxing the guy who we thought was our lead. The days speed up. As this 4th issue kind of closes out, we go back to the pacing and style of the 1st issue. We're blowing through days. We're raising the stakes. It all works as callbacks. We develop Catwoman a little bit more. Someone refers to her as Robin Hood, which is the joke that was made kind of sardonically about Batman early on in the 1st issue.
Yeah.
And now we're exploring the similarities between Catwoman and Batman. It's like Gordon has taken a step back, or he's fallen to temptation, and now he's unworthy of being a main character. Because there are pages in the story that are written like Catwoman is our second lead.
Yeah, right, because she's kind of starts to take over.
And I mean, even the first time she suits up, it feels like it's directly inspired by Batman.
Oh, yeah, of course.
In the same way her outfit in The Batman. That whole action feels like Bruce Wayne turning into Batman. I love the way they mirror that evolution, but it feels like a punishment of Gordon as much as it does a promotion for Catwoman. Like he's lost the right to that throne. It's like Gordon has fallen. He's now a dirty cop. He didn't expressly take bribes. He didn't ignore crimes, but now we know he's impure or like not worth following, not worth investing in or sympathizing with.
Yes. Anything he does now is not based on trying to uphold the law. It's about protecting himself.
Right.
Yeah.
So in that most precarious moment, boom, the even worse cops are back, and they're trying to kill his wife and abduct his child. And the reveal is that Bruce Wayne is there. That Batman is still watching Gordon.
Yes.
That he hasn't made this moral judgment against him. That he's unworthy to be part of the story or part of their kind of tangled web. He's right there still. Which is a message of kind of forgiveness or redemption. In the same way, when we see Gordon and Batman interacting in the Robert Pattinson movie, there's a trust there.
Yeah.
There's a faith in each other, even if they don't know anything about each other, really. Yeah. They know each other's actions enough to trust that, but, I mean, he doesn't tell him he's Bruce Wayne. Right. And he doesn't know anything about Gordon's home life. Right. If the wife thing is canon.
They both say to each other in the movie, like, you're the only person I trust right now. Because Gordon loses all trust in all the other cops.
Yes.
And Batman doesn't trust anybody.
And this is the moment in that joined desperation where they finally work together. Gordon saves the baby. That panel, when he sees the baby go over the side of the bridge.
Oh my gosh, it was so awful.
The colors, I mean, everything turns shades of red. And it just, in big, chunky letters like we don't see anywhere else in the book, it just says no. And he dives over the side of the bridge.
Yeah, it's brutal,
But it's so visceral, human, and rousing. Like so many of the orchestral swell moments in the movie. They gave that ultimate hero moment to Gordon here. Which I think is kind of maybe again a statement about the hierarchy within this story. Batman takes out the bad cops. Gordon loses his glasses, so then when he thanks Batman, even though it's Bruce Wayne because he doesn't have the costume on at this point, he doesn't know his secret identity.
Yes, he doesn't figure out who he is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I almost interpreted that as maybe he's lying.
Interesting.
Because he says like, I'm basically blind without my glasses. Yeah. That's how I read it, as like, oh, I have no idea who you are, Batman. Like, that's kind of what I thought. I thought it was like I won't say anything about who you are because I didn't see you. That's kind of how I interpreted it.
Because the dialogue is still written out in comics, you're exploiting that ambiguity.
Yes, right.
To maybe have the character be smarter than he was.
On the page in the panel, you don't see Bruce Wayne. Like,
That's
you
true.
know that Gordon is looking at him, but you don't actually see him. And so it's up to us to determine how much he looks like Bruce Wayne in that moment. Like, is he all disheveled? Like, is he covered in mud from the water? Like, we don't know how much he looks like himself. So maybe he does or doesn't know either, So there is a lot of ambiguity there.
And then we end the story with the status quo that we have going into the movie. We have the Joker teased in a very similar way to how they do it in the movie.
Yes.
There's a suggestion of new problems, new corruption, more mob drama. It really sets up the Long Halloween, which sort of exists within this canon.
Oh, okay.
You have a flawed Gordon who's trying to improve, survive, and grow. He's trying to be better with his wife.
Yeah, because he's told his wife at this point about the affair, and obviously the woman is gone, and he says something about couples therapy, so that's good. So
yeah, and he's trying. He's flawed, but he's trying. He's not a hero. He's a person.
Yeah.
And he refers to Batman as a friend. And that's the note that we end the story on, is them finally converging.
Yeah.
I love this because it's not, like you said, one of those superhero stories that makes your eyes roll back in your head and you're bored and it feels by the numbers.
Yeah.
It's a story about characters striving in a really tough world.
Yeah. It's a very, very human story, which is like a huge complaint I have about most superhero stories, is that they don't feel human. And that's why I don't like them. I don't connect with them at all, but I connected with this one a lot more.
It really reminded me of the last couple discussions we've had about The Witcher, which is what we talk about on Fridays now that we're done with the Lord of the Rings chapters. Because the struggle we've had with Geralt lately is the author creating all of these situations that test his moral code, the code he has as a Witcher. And this story is very much two characters in very different situations struggling to live by a set of principles and ideals. And we see the creators throwing every curveball and difficulty they can at them.
Yeah.
And that's the fun of stories. We get to see how they respond and watch them try to live up to those ideals. But it's not just that effort. I think the important thing here, and why it stands out from the billion other Batman stories that have been told, is that we see them fail. We see them try to fix the damage of what they do when they screw up.
Yeah.
We see those panels of Gordon trying to make amends and trying to rebuild with his wife. We see Bruce Wayne kind of tinker and adjust the way he acts as Batman. And we see them try again.
Yeah.
Like, the whole critique of superhero shit in the last 20 years is everything becoming grimdark.
Yeah.
This story is grim, but it's human.
Yeah.
It's not dark for, like, darkness' sake.
No.
It's fundamentally cooperative in the way Lord of the Rings, the answer to every single problem, is cooperation and compromise.
Yes.
This is a fearful, aspirational human story,
Right.
which is so much more than just a cape.
And and it's both of these guys trying to do the right thing and like having this like optimistic, hopeful outlook, but you can't just blindly do that when you're in such a brutal world. And that's something that I think that nuance is lacking in a lot of these superhero stories, is that it's just, he always does the right thing and you know, just be the good guy, when it's not ever that simple or easy. And so this explores how difficult and complex that actually is, and how hard it is for you to survive with that outlook. Like, that's why Gordon struggles so much. He can't just be the only good cop in an entirely corrupt system, because he would drown and his family would, he would lose his family. Yeah. So he has to try to survive while still upholding his morals, and that's very difficult.
And let's not pass over the fact that this is a mainstream story in a superhero medium that is the number one thing at the box office. And and the villain is the corruption and apathy of our institutions. There's
I
a scathing
know.
social critique throughout every panel of this story.
Well, and that's my favorite thing that was about this and about the movie that we
Yeah.
saw, was how it was just critiquing our system, and I thought that was
But
great.
both of them take such pains, and I don't think this is necessary of art. I think you can just critique things. But there's a prescription in both of these stories, and they both spend their last 10 minutes slamming home the message of hope and just basic kindness. When the woman's freaking out at being put on the stretcher at the end of the Batman, and he just like holds her
Oh my
for a
gosh,
second.
that was so sad.
That's
and
the
sweet.
humanity.
Yeah.
It's the hope and the kindness.
Yeah.
That's the message.
Yeah.
It's the point of the story is not the cool guy dressed up as a clown.
Yeah,
It's the humanity.
Right.
It's not the hero. It's acts of heroism that anyone can aspire to.
right.
I just
'Cause it's a human story. Yeah.
I like Batman because I think he often, much more than any other superhero, transcends superheroes.
Yes.
And this is one of those peak stories.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, this was a really fun thing to read. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, me too.
If you like haven't really read much Batman or comics or anything, I think this is a good one to try.
Yep.
Because it's a manageable size and it's
totally.
an origin story, so you don't have to have like
No knowledge
background
at
on the
all.
lore. You don't have to
Yeah.
know anything.
No.
Like even if like it helped that I knew that Gordon becomes Commissioner Gordon, and like
Yeah.
but like you don't have to know any of
No.
that. You can go into this completely blind and just enjoy the ride. It's fun,
Right.
Because you get enough context and backstory that there's no confusion. So
It's very approachable.
yeah, this was great.
Excellent.
Yeah, let us know if you've read this, what you think of it. Other fun Batman comics that we should read, maybe that you suggest.
Yeah, I'd be open to doing some more.